When someone dies, they usually leave an estate. At various points in U.S. history, taxes were due on the estate. The first one is in 1797, was repealed shortly thereafter. There were other temporary death and estate taxes during the Civil and Spanish-American War. The permanent estate tax was established by the Revenue Act of 1916, and those top rates have been as high as 77%. There's also the Tax Reform Act of 1976, which unified estate and gift taxes. The Economic Growth and Tax Reconciliation Act of 2001 phased in higher exemptions and lower rates, culminating in a one-year repeal in 2010. So, you were wealthy and you died in 2010, there was no estate tax. Famous examples of those people that paid no estate taxes, or their estates rather did. George Steinbrenner, the Yankees owner, John W. Kluge, a media mogul, Dan L. Duncan, an oil billionaire, Jane Cargill, who was an heir to the Cargill family fortune. All of them, when they passed, no estate taxes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the history of estate taxes. When it was first implemented in 1916, the exemption amount was 50,000, which meant if you left behind an estate of 50,000 or less, there was no estate tax. Amounts over that, you paid 10%. In 1926, the exemption was $100,000. Tax rate was 25%. Over the years, the exemption rate has been as high as $40,000, or as low as $40,000, and as high as $675,000. Interesting thing, when someone died, if you died between 1916 and 1948, taxes were due on the non-exempt amount, even if the spouse was the sole heir. So if the majority of what the decedent owned was in a business, it might necessitate the sale of the business at fire sale prices. So, tax rates are ranged from 20 to 77%. And like I mentioned before, until 1948, if the spouse was the heir, they're treated the same as everybody else inheriting. But from 1948 to 1981, spouses had a limited deduction. There was some relief that was granted. Means they were treated differently than everybody else that inherited. And from 1982 until present day, spouses had an unlimited deduction. Okay. Now, they changed a little bit in 2011. The exemption amount returned in 2011 with higher exemptions. It started out at $5+ million indexed for inflation, and the top rate was between 35 and 40%. Also, they allowed portability between spouses, which meant that if you had $10 million and you left it all to your spouse, and then the spouse died, they would get the $5 million that you had for the exemption plus yours. It wasn't like, whoops, the spouse died and only got to exempt $5 million. Okay, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts of 2017 doubled the exemptions to over 11 million, indexed for inflation. Top rate stayed between 35 and 40%. Also, portability between spouses was implemented, and like I talked about before, in the 2000s thus far, or in the 2020s thus far, revenues to the federal government range between 17.6 billion in 2020 to an estimated 32 billion in later years. So basically, it's not much revenue to the governments. There's an ongoing policy tension between revenue generation, wealth concentration, versus arguments about double taxation and impacts on family business and farms. And like I said, with those numbers, it's not a significant revenue source to the federal government. So, estate taxes versus inheritance taxes. What's the difference? Estate taxes are levied by the federal and some state governments, and they're paid by the estate prior to distributing to heirs. So, if you're an heir, you don't have to worry about paying estate taxes. When the money shows up in your possession, it's the estate taxes have already been paid. Now, inheritance taxes, on the other hand, are levied by individual states, paid by those inheriting the estates, states that currently have inheritance taxes. Kentucky, Maryland, Nebraska, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. So if you're in one of those 5 states and you get inheritance, it is distinctly possible you will have to pay an inheritance tax. But here's the rub. Some states also have estate taxes like Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington, and the District of Columbia. So spouses are exempt in all inheritance tax states. Maryland is unique in that it has both a state and inheritance tax. So uh, if you're leaving money to people and you live in Maryland, they could be paying 3 taxes before it gets to their hands, depending on. So some people say, hey, why don't I just give away everything before I die? If you give gifts, except to U.S. citizen spouses, above the annual gift exclusion, which in 2026 is $19,000, you'll probably need to file at least a gift tax return to document it, as it will reduce the amount of exclusion for estate taxes. So if you gave away $1 million to somebody, then your 11 million is now reduced to 10 million. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll owe gift taxes on the spot. Oh, by the way, there are special rules if you're married to someone who is not a U.S. citizen. The annual exclusion is from one person to another. So if John Smith gives $19,000 to John Jr., no gift tax return. Then John Smith can give $19,000 to daughter Mary, and no gift tax is required. His wife Jane can do the same things without filing a return. These gifts include cash, securities, and tangible property. So if John Jr. is gifted a brand new Corvette, I'm guessing a gift tax return is likely required. There are exceptions for direct payments to qualified educational institutions for tuition and for direct payments to medical institutions for medical services. So if John Sr., pays for John Jr.'s college tuition and it's $60,000, that is exempt from declaration. Or if he buys or pays for medical services for his mom, not a problem. But thing is, they have to be made directly. They can't be reimbursements. If you write the check to the person, then it doesn't count. If you write the check to the institution, it does count for the exemption. And these gifts interact in different ways with state estate and inheritance taxes. And I won't be discussing them today because that's a big ball of wax and we don't have time for it. But here's the thing. If you hear nothing else, always consult a tax professional in these matters. Why do I need to do any estate planning? I'm not that rich. As you can see, estate tax laws have changed over the years. Planning is always prudent. One example, I have friends who are married. The husband bought a house before he met his wife. The house is still in his name alone. He has had no will. Had he passed away before he got a will, his wife might have had to split the house with the children. And consequences are different for each jurisdiction, but with the qualified legal advice, you can help avoid unexpected and potentially undesirable outcomes. Why bring in a financial advisor? They'll bring perspective that might not occur to you. They'll help you stay focused on your goals. They'll analyze and record adjustments to your plan if warranted. If you don't have a plan, they'll help you build a plan for your unique situation. They'll spot potential potholes in your path and suggest ways to mitigate or avoid them. And they also will help optimize Social Security and pension benefits. In some cases, they'll do tax planning, and with qualified legal representation, help set up your estate so the maximum amount goes to where you want it to. Once you graduate, be it from engineering school, welding school, or law school, you're going to need a plan for each stage of the life. Today, we've been focusing on legacy to make sure what you worked hard for gets to where you want it to after retirement. So feel free to call me because I do in person or Zoom and phone appointments. I am licensed and registered across several states and can easily add states if there's a need. If you'd like to schedule an appointment, you can click on the schedule an appointment button in the upper right-hand corner of my website. Want to see more videos like this? Go to my website and click on the YouTube channel button. For those who prefer the good old-fashioned telephone, 518-631-2569. Do not text that number. We'll both be sad. There's a separate texting number if texting's your thing. Opinions voiced in this material for general information only, not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested in directly. All data is believed to be from reliable sources, however, no representations made as to its completeness or accuracy. None of this is to be construed as tax or legal advice. Consult your advisor prior to taking any action. Information is intended to be educational, not tailored to investment needs of any specific investor. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assumes success or protects against loss. There's no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect against market risk.